Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we are back again to the least popular series on my channel, 7.3 Exploration. Today we're going to be taking a look at 7.34, and this was the first quest where, pretty much all the paths were somewhat annoying, some more than others, but there were definitely less cheesable paths. I think this is one of the quests where you kind of had to think a bit more. So we're going to start from left to right. We're going to take a look at paradox debuffs. So every time you apply a debuff to the defender, you gain a paradox charge, which by definition means you do not want champions that inflict debuffs at all. Because you inflict debuff by parry, and that's all you need. And if you're going to be inflicting more than that, you're going to have fairly hard time getting rid of them. Then we have this Entropic attitude. The attacker gains 30% buff potency for each paradox on the attacker. Whenever the attacker dodges an attack using the dexterity mastery, remove 1. So you parry, gain 1 dex, you lose 1, and what it gives you is a buff potency. So you want to focus on champions that gain buffs but do not inflict debuffs on the opponent. Moving on, we have Quantum Safeguard, which basically means you deal pretty much no damage until you have 3 paradox charges, so until you have parried 3 times in a row. Heavy-handed and ionized armor. Now, here, it's fairly straightforward. You can bring in any champion that does not rely on inflicting debuffs to the opponent. Bring in Aegon, ramp him up against Ghost. You're going to have a good time. Bring in a counter for Warlock in form of any, robot, and you're going to be pretty much set. Bring in Warlock against Havoc, and just use special 3s, don't drop level 1s, don't drop level 2s, you're going to be good there. Or bring in whoever else you want. Now, as it comes to making this significantly easier later on, what you can do is, for at the very least some of these fights, you can use champion like Professor X as well, because when you get to level 2, and you have increased promise potency, you're going to be able to nuke them off. If you have mutant power boost, this is one of those lanes where you can use it, except that there's fair few tech champions, which make it a bit more, obviously, significantly more annoying. But Professor X is still a very, very solid option. Or as I mentioned before, you can bring in your good old Star-Lord, you can bring in your Aegon, you can bring in Hercules, or whichever champion does not debuff. That's literally the only significant condition there, is because you're going to be managing that situation with parries and dexterity, and you don't want additional debuffs messing you up. Moving on to the next one, Ebb and Flow Knockdown, Steady Perseverance, which means that they will go stun immune after they use special attack. And Evasive Maneuvers, whenever you knock them down, they're going to have evasive charge and kinetic transference. So all this, again, it kind of amounts for a lot of nothing, and it just means that you want an evade counter. If you bring in Mallman or bring in, again, Professor X is a phenomenal option for here with a mutant power boost, because with Professor X, you just get to level 2, knock them down, and then if you have mutant power boost, you basically endlessly spam your level 2, and that's it. That's how you can finish off the fight. Here, the trick is to counter evade. Any champion that counters evade extremely well will do great job here without much problems. That's the only thing that you need to fight off against. And as we can see by the fights there, Agent Venom might be kind of like the only one that's kind of properly annoying there. Right, moving on to this third lane. Now we're going to have Power Suppression. Whenever a science attacker activates special attack, they have 100% chance to enervate the defender for 6 seconds, preventing them from gaining power when struck. Whenever this enervate would expire, consume 1 debuff on the defender and reapply itself. Now, Small Arms, which gives both players, either attack or whatever else, like a Fury. On special attacks, we have Power Snack, Feats of Energy, where opponent is going to be gaining a significant amount of energy, and Special 2 Bias. So the name of the game here is bring a science champion and inflict as many debuffs as possible. That's quite literally it. So you can go in the approach of Captain America. Make sure that you have another science champion, a tech champion, a cosmic champion. And Captain America will do a great deal of work here. Void also is a great option. I remember Void saved me against this Super Skull. The Super Skull is actually a very tough fight. He really is. And Mr. Fantastic is the MVP. I could even recommend perhaps bringing in a full Fantastic 4 team, because every single fight here, Mr. Fantastic absolutely destroys and counters extremely well. Starting from that Iron Man Infinity War, going to Doctor Doom, then Dormammu, easy job there as well. So Mr. Fantastic, definite MVP. And not to mention, if you have full Fantastic 4 team, then you're going to be inflicting additional weakness debuff every time you parry. You are going to be inflicting additional debuffs in your level 1s or level 2s, and you're going to have much easier time. Now, one key thing that you want to make sure is that you apply your petrified debuff first, so it's not the first one that this node eats up. That was one mistake that I was consistently making with power suppression, because petrified debuff is the third debuff that you apply with Mr. Fantastic, and that meant that it's kind of like last in a row, and it was always first to be eaten, which is something you want to avoid, because you want to have petrifies up in order to counter power snack and in order to counter that feat of energy. Resonate Mastery is a huge help here as well. Not to mention that Spider-Man 2099 should be a very good option here as well. If you happen to have ranked up yours due to the recent increase in popularity, I do think that Spider-Man 2099 could be quite helpful here. Perhaps even Anti-Venom as well, especially considering that it makes Spider-Man 2099 even more, powerful with that Wither debuff from the start of the fight. This is like a good old-fashioned science lane, more or less. Now, Thunderstruck. Now, this lane is, again, one of those lanes that kind of annoys me, but in this case, they actually have, like, the toughest set of defenders here on this lane, because we can see that we have Strife, we have Guillotine 2099, then we have Punisher, we have Dragon Man, and Psycho Man, and all of those are quite annoying champions to go up against. But the idea on all of these lanes in 7.3, whether it's Thunderstruck or whatever other ones that are Shock, Bleed, Poison, and so on and so forth, is that you want a champion that does not knock down the opponent, and that's it, and doesn't debuff them. So bring in Star-Lord, bring in Aegon, bring in Hercules, bring in any champion that does plenty of damage on their basic attacks without having a need to spam special attacks, because that will make opponents go debuff immune, and you can't have that because you need to have shock debuff on them in order to do proper damage, which other nodes will take care of. So yeah, you can Star-Lord it, you can Hercules it, you can Aegon it, you can whatever else works. Obviously, the fights against Stripe, the fights against Guillotine 2099, so on and so forth, are kind of annoying. It's probably the most annoying out of all 4 or 5 of these lanes, where we have pretty much the same set of nodes. But it's still the same principle. Just don't knock them down. Keep an eye on the amount of debuffs that they have, because they will have increased combat power rate. Don't debuff them yourself. Don't knock them down, and you know, you're going to get 200% increase in attack. Now, next lane, this is one of the lanes that can be cheesed quite well. So whenever the attacker gains a buff, they also gain 1 paradox charge. So every time you dex, you will gain a paradox charge. And by default, you will want to avoid champions that gain many buffs by themselves. Then we have this Entropic generator. You gain increased combat power rate for each paradox charge. And if you finish a combo with a light attack, then remove 1 paradox charge. Now, Quantum Inversion, where they start unblockable until you go to 3 paradox charges. So until you dex, strike the opponent, dex again, then their unblockability disappears. Now, Special Delivery, and we have Parry Vulnerability. Now you can use a plethora of different champions here. I did a lot of work with like Kingpin and, you know, so on and so forth, but you can also just kind of go and either, well, stun locking here is not the best call, because we have Nick Fury that will go stun immune, and we have Vision Arcus and Daredevil that will shrug them off. But half of the fights here you can safely stun lock with any champion that has like 100% stun chance on any of their special attacks pending. You just need to figure out if it's special 2, you probably need more paradox charges. If it's special 1, you need less paradox charges. But thanks to the increase in combat power rate, you can just kind of stun them infinitely. You can bring in other champions this lane once you kind of understand it. It's not too hard. Again, I think I used Kingpin for quite a bit here. I might have used Dr. Doom as well for Vision Arcus and something else. Dr. Doom was perfectly fine option. I think I brought in like White Magneto just so I could safely parry Daredevil Hell's Kitchen and Vision Arcus. But it's fairly free. The key note to know here is you don't want to be gaining many, if any, buffs. That's about it. Because then, again, you're not going to be able to get rid of them early enough. But with increasing combat power rate, you're going to be spamming your own special attacks like crazy. So if you can either stun lock them or you have potent power control abilities, you're going to be laughing here. Again, plenty of options. Whoever you kind of want that doesn't buff much, you're probably going to do just about fine. Dr. Doom, as I said before, worked out a treat as well. And this last lane, double down, precision parry, shifting immunity, bleeding poison, Mixmaster. It's effectively a Mixmaster lane. That's what all it is. So opponents are immune to stun debuffs, but when you strike their block, whenever you would parry, if you have precision buffs, they consume all precisions and convert them into a passive stun, and there's a node that gives you extra precisions. So in general, this is a, let's say, Mixmaster lane to its core with alternate version of parry, and that's about it. So champions that you want to use, Falcon is absolutely fantastic here because obviously Mixmaster lets him gain the cruelties and he's a skill champion, so he will be able to stun them and that capitalize on extra damage. Mole Man absolutely shreds this entire shebang. Nick Fury, especially obviously if you want to go in his second life, can very quickly shut down opponents away, then just be done with it. So more than enough solid options, like your top skill champions, as long as they counterweight. You can bring in Elsa Bloodstone. Killmonger does just about fine here as well. There's absolutely nothing wrong with bringing Killmonger, Falcon, Mole Man, Elsa, or whoever you like to use in order to counter Mixmaster in general. And the opponents are fairly straightforward there as well. Wasp, Void, Venom the Dark, Loki, Human Torch, Tiger, nothing out of this world. And now the three bosses. The three bosses are actually a bit more interesting because each of them have a bit different unique identities. Now with Doctor Strange, the key aspect there are armor. So every time he uses a special attack, he gains an armor up buff, and every time you strike him whilst he has an armor up buff, you take damage back. So effectively this Doctor Strange is kind of a mix of a Doctor Strange and Electro, where his damage back is fueled by armor up buffs. Keep in mind that one of his stances generically give him armor up buff as well. And then we have heavy-handed, special chaos inversion, prey on the weak. So when it comes to special chaos inversion, you can just ignore this node. Initially, I was kind of worried because it often was annoying in Act 6. I remember this node gave me some trouble in Act 6. But then I realized it was only because in Act 6, all those specials were unblockable. Here, they're not. And Doctor Strange isn't exactly the hardest hitter now. So if you're bringing in appropriately ranked up champion, you can just take those specials on the block and really not gonna affect too much. Just don't try to dex them. If he shoots off a special attack, you just block them. So ultimate counters to this ionized armor and ironclad is very, very simple. Either bring in mystic champions, Dr. Doom or whoever, to nullify all the armor buffs, and if all the armor buffs are nullified, you have nothing to worry about. It's literally just a Doctor Strange fight. Or bring in champions that armor break. Now, keep in mind that there is this Prey on the Weak node where he will be gaining more power if you have a champion that gains buffs and he nullifies them and stuff like that. So, Dr. Doom, for instance, can be perfect here. Even Magic will do the trick because if he can't use special attacks, then he can't get any more armor ups. I have solo this fight with Mr. Fantastic and just reversing his power gain and not letting him use special attacks. And that worked fine. You can probably do this fight well enough with, let's say, Captain America Infinity War as well, with a similar principle of always reversing his power gain, or at the very least reducing it. And then, obviously Captain America Infinity War, if you have Cosmic on your team, could armor break as well. So Captain America Infinity War will do just fine here. Dr. Doom is fantastic, so on and so forth. The base idea is, yes, you need to deal with either special attacks, make sure he doesn't throw them, or you just nullify the armor ups or armor breaks, and you're good. Block the specials, don't worry about that. So the next fight here, this one is... I think Abam here tried to be cheeky. but it kind of failed. So it has feats of power, it has power gain rate immune. So you can't petrify it, basically what it means. So you can't void it, you can't Cap America Infinity War. It's not really going to help too much. Steady Perseverance and then Ebb and Flow. But here's the joke. This guy's also not immune to regular power control. So bring in Dr. Doom and you're done. You know, you're going to be nullifying his stun immunity buff with your staggers. And you're going to be power draining him. So you're going to have nothing to worry. You can bring in magic, you know. You can power lock him. You can... That's it. That being said, Human Torch can still one-shot the guy as well. There wasn't too much trouble because it's not like, you know, this guy is such a bane to fight. You can't petrify him, fair enough, but you can power drain, steal, lock him, and power burn him. No real problem there. I think Kingpin with Mr. Sinister synergy worked out really well as well. So there's that. Okay, and this final one, the Sorcerer Supreme, it is a bit more tricky. Not gonna lie, but there are still perfectly viable candidates. So there is steady build-up unblockable whenever you get up to three or more debuffs. She goes completely unblockable, and whenever you happen to purify them, then you go unblockable. There is Spite, the Staggering Beauty, which effectively, as you stay close to her, you're going to be getting less staggers on you. All her special attacks are unblockable, and we have Prey in the Weak. Now, her own innate power gain plus Spite can make this fight spiral out of control quick. But number one, there is absolutely no incentive not to use either power control or the petrifies. You can bring in Void and make sure she never gains any power. You can probably bring in Captain America Infinity War, especially if you have a skill champion on your team. And you're going to be skill and tech champions, and you're going to be doing quite well. On top of that, you can bring in Miles, let her be unblockable at all times, and just spam heavy attacks. That's it. Just stay close to her, spam heavy attacks, put the taunt on her. She's going to be throwing special attacks as and when she gets them. You're not going to be gaining any buffs. So Prey in a Weak and Spite will not be triggering. She's only going to have her innate power gain. You're going to have a bunch of staggers placed on you, and, you know, she's going to be getting KO'd very quickly. So Miles absolutely cheesed this fight. And again, Dr. Doom will do fine. I solo this fight with Mr. Negative as well. I think he's going to do well enough. Suspect that Thing could be quite an interesting option here. Or if not Thing, then perhaps Spider-Man 2099. Again, enabled to trigger Spite. Reversing power control. So plenty of options for all of these bosses. Mainly in science categories, but you know, you can always use whichever champions you want. And yeah, that is about it for this one, and that means we have 5 and 6 left. So I'll try to get those out as quick as possible, but meanwhile, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. See you soon. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about